Her hands trembled slightly as the words, "sentenced to death," echoed through the courtroom. The air was still. No one spoke. No one dared move. A hero had fallen from grace. Her fate was sealed. But what her dog did next would shake the very foundation of justice. Officer Emily Carson wasn't just another name in the system. She'd spent years patrolling the most dangerous precincts in the state, always with her trusted canine partner, Duke. Duke wasn't just a trained police dog. He was family. Loyal, fearless, and fiercely protective, he'd saved lives. Now his world was crumbling. The accusations against Emily were severe. Prosecutors claimed she broke into a private residence without a warrant, chased an unarmed suspect, and shot him point blank. There were holes in the case, but they weren't enough to stop the gavel from falling. Key surveillance footage had mysteriously vanished. Body cam data was corrupted. Witnesses who could have cleared her name were suddenly silent. And Emily? She wouldn't name names. She refused to shift blame to her fellow officers just to save herself. Outside the courthouse, the public was torn. Some stood firm in their belief that Emily was innocent, a scapegoat. Others demanded accountability. The jury didn't take long. The verdict, guilty. The sentence, death. A hush fell over the courtroom. Emily blinked once, slowly. At the back of the room, nearly hidden in the shadows, sat Duke. His ears perked at the judge's words, his body stiffened. A low, mournful whine escaped him, one that reached beyond the courtroom walls and into the hearts of everyone who heard it. Emily was led away in silence that night. No time for goodbyes. No last words to her loyal partner. Just the cold clang of chains and the dim flicker of fluorescent lights overhead. Duke was forcibly leashed and separated from her, hauled off to a nearby K9 holding facility. But no one realized what had just begun to stir inside the German Shepherd. Duke was no ordinary dog. Days passed, and he refused to eat. He ignored even the simplest commands, ones he had once followed with precision. He wasn't merely sad. He was grieving. Each time someone passed his kennel, he stared at them, unblinking, as if waiting for someone who would never come. Trainers tried. Everything, special toys, premium treats, even bringing in other dogs he had once trained with. Nothing worked. Duke sat silently in the corner of his kennel, his head resting on the cold concrete floor. He barely blinked. The world had gone still. One night, when a handler attempted to move Duke to another section of the facility, he growled, not out of aggression, but out of resistance. A quiet, fierce defiance. "I'm not leaving," he seemed to say. "Not without her." Eventually, the staff gave up trying to retrain him. He was marked as emotionally unstable, unfit for further duty. Discussions began about early retirement or finding him a new home, but that too proved difficult. Every time someone came to adopt him, Duke either growled or turned his back. He didn't want a new life. He wanted Emily. One elderly handler, named Jack, a man who'd worked with K9s for over 30 years, stood watching Duke one evening. "I've never seen loyalty like that," he murmured to a colleague. "It's like he's waiting for someone or something." A week later, Jack made a mistake, a simple one. He forgot to secure Duke's kennel latch properly. The dog hadn't moved then, but that night everything changed. When the facility lights dimmed and silence took over, Duke acted. Quietly, efficiently. He nudged the unlatched door, slipped out of the kennel, and padded silently through the hallways. By the time anyone noticed he was gone, Duke had already made it past the main gates. Officers launched a massive search. The area was combed for miles. Flyers were printed. Social media posts went viral. But no one could find him. What they didn't realize was that Duke wasn't lost. He had a destination. He was headed to the last place he saw Emily alive, the courthouse. But that wasn't his final stop. Duke remembered the route to the correctional facility where Emily was being held. Years of K9 training had etched it into his mind. Street layouts, guard shifts, building access points. This wasn't a wandering dog on a mission of grief. This was a rescue in progress. Inside the state correctional facility, Officer Emily Carson sat alone in a dim concrete cell. No clock, no comfort, no voice except the one in her mind, reminding her what tomorrow meant. Execution. Her appeal had been denied. The headlines were already written. The public had moved on. The system had swallowed her whole. Emily sat motionless on the edge of her steel-framed cot, eyes hollow, soul numb. Her thoughts had drifted far from the courtroom, far from justice. Mostly they drifted to Duke. Was he okay? Did he know what had happened to her? Did he miss her? Then, a sound. Faint at first. A bark. Her eyes lifted. It was distant. Could have been a memory. Could have been her mind playing tricks. But it came again. Closer. Louder. Sharper. Emily stood. Her heart began to pound. She crossed to the door and pressed her ear against it. Yells erupted from down the hallway. Footsteps thundered. Radios crackled. "There's a dog in the West Wing. How the hell did it get inside?" Emily's breath caught. She stepped back from the door, her hands shaking now, not from fear, but from hope. The barking was frantic now, desperate, familiar, and then just outside the bars of her cell he appeared. Duke. His coat was soaked from rain. Mud caked his paws. But his eyes, those sharp amber eyes, locked with hers, and everything stopped. He pressed his nose to the bars, whimpered, and wagged his tail once. Emily dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Duke. Oh, my God, you came." A spark ignited inside her that had long been dead. For the first time in months, her heart felt alive again. Moments later, armed guards flooded the hallway. They raised their weapons, shouting for Emily to get back, but none of them fired, because what stood between them and the prisoner wasn't a threat. It was loyalty incarnate. Duke didn't growl, he didn't bark. He stood firm, chest out, tail high, eyes watching, a silent protector, a symbol none of them could ignore. The hallway froze. No one dared move. Then came the warden, a man forged in steel. Years of command had carved every wrinkle in his face. He approached with caution, flanked by 2 officers. His gaze swept over Emily, then narrowed on the German shepherd standing at her side. "What is this?" the warden demanded. Emily stood slowly, placing her hand on the bars. Duke immediately positioned himself in front of her again, shielding her. "He's my partner," she said softly. "He's never left me. Not even now." The warden stared at the dog, frowning. "Are you telling me this animal broke into a maximum security prison? For you?" She nodded, tears still clinging to her lashes. "He's always protected me, even when no one else would." Silence hung in the air. The warden looked down at Duke. For a long moment, nothing was said. No orders, no movement. Just a man watching something he didn't understand. Then Duke took a single step forward. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply stood taller. And it broke something in every officer in that hallway. Not fear, respect. What they were witnessing wasn't a dog. It was a force, a testament, proof that some bonds go deeper than bars and badges. The warden gave no command. No one did. For the first time, someone questioned everything about this case. Days later, the prison was still buzzing. The security breach had gone viral. Footage of Duke running through the prison, tail flying behind him, had captured the hearts of millions. Then came the twist. A whistleblower stepped forward, anonymous, brave, and damning. New evidence emerged. Corrupted files, missing body cam footage, all linked to a senior officer named Forge, a veteran with a spotless record, and a dark secret. The shooting Emily had been blamed for? A setup. Emily had been framed, and Duke had sensed the truth all along. The IRT courthouse reopened the case. National media swarmed the building. Commentators called it the trial that loyalty resurrected. Journalists dug into every angle, but none could explain it better than what had already played out. A dog had defied every barrier to save the one person who had never betrayed him. In the packed courtroom, Emily sat quietly, her hand resting on Duke's head. He wore his old K9 badge again, polished and shining. The judge took the bench. Cameras clicked, hearts raced. All charges, the judge announced, are hereby dropped. Officer Emily Carson, you are free. A collective gasp swept the room. Emily turned to Duke, her face crumpling into quiet sobs. You saved me, she whispered. You never stopped believing in me. Duke licked her hand, tail thumping once against the polished courtroom floor. The courtroom rose in silent awe, not for Emily, not even for the judge, but for a dog. Dog that had become a symbol of everything pure and right in a world that had forgotten how to believe. Freedom didn't feel real at first. Emily stepped out of the courthouse into the sunlight, blinking against the brightness like she hadn't seen it in years. Reporters swarmed her. Microphones pushed toward her face. Cameras clicked endlessly, but she didn't say much. She just knelt down beside Duke, wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "Let's go home." Except, home didn't exist anymore. Not really. The life she had before the arrest, the trial, the sentence, it was gone. Her badge had been taken, her reputation dragged through the mud, her name tossed around like a curse. But Duke, he had stayed, and with that, she decided it was time to rebuild, from scratch. She moved far from the city. No more patrol cars or flashing lights, no more concrete cells or courtroom drama. She found a small town tucked between the hills and the forests, a place where people still waved to strangers and left their doors unlocked. It was here, in this quiet corner of America, that Emily found peace again. And it was here that she opened the K9 Haven Training Center, a sanctuary for retired and troubled police dogs. Dogs like Duke, dogs that had seen too much and felt too deeply. At first, she didn't expect anyone to come. But word spread. Slowly, then all at once. There were officers with K9s who had been injured in the line of duty. There were handlers, grieving for fallen partners. And there were dogs, dozens of them, labeled too aggressive, too broken, or too old. Emily took them all, because she understood them now. She knew what it felt like to be discarded, to be misunderstood, to be loyal to a system that didn't always protect its own. And Duke? He was with her every step of the way. He'd trot alongside her during training sessions, greet every dog that came through the gates, and at night, he'd rest beside her porch watching the stars as if guarding the little world they'd built together. One afternoon, a boy named Liam showed up at the center with his grandmother. He was no older than 10, thin, quiet, a little haunted. His parents had been killed in a car accident the year before, and he hadn't spoken a word since. His grandmother hoped the dogs might help him heal. Emily introduced him to Max, a Belgian Malinois who had retired early after his partner was injured. Max was fast, smart, but afraid of sudden movements. For weeks, Liam sat with Max in silence, just watching, just being there. And then, one day, as Duke strolled over to sit beside them, Liam whispered something. "Good boy." It was the first thing he'd said in nearly a year. Emily turned away quickly so no one would see her tears. But Duke, he just leaned in and rested his head on Liam's knee, like he understood everything. From then on, things changed. More kids came. Some from foster homes, some from broken homes, others with anxiety or trauma too deep for words. But the dogs didn't need words, they just stayed, listened, healed. The K9 Haven wasn't just a training center anymore. It was a place where people and dogs found second chances. One evening, long after the last visitors had left, Emily sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching Duke gaze out at the fields. He was older now. The black in his coat had faded to silver. He moved slower, rested longer. But his eyes, they still burned with purpose. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think I saved you. but it was the other way around. Duke flicked his ear, as if he understood. She smiled. They had been through hell. They had faced a world that tried to tear them apart. But somehow they had found each other again, and in doing so, had created something no one could ever take away. Loyalty, family, home. As the years passed, the story of Duke and Emily became legend. Schools invited her to speak. Officers brought their new K-9s to train under her guidance. Parents came looking for hope. Veterans came looking for peace. And always, Duke was there, at the heart of it all. When the time finally came, when Duke's steps grew too slow and his eyes too heavy, Emily didn't leave his side. She wrapped him in his favorite blanket, laid beside him under the oak tree behind the center, and whispered, "You did good, boy. You did so good." The whole town came to his memorial. Officers lined the driveway. Kids held hand-drawn signs. One of them read, "He saved her, then he saved us." Emily placed Duke's badge on a wooden frame inside the center, right above the entrance. Underneath it, she had a plaque engraved with just 6 words, "For the one who never left." The K-9 Haven Training Center still stands today, and above, the front door carved into the archway in bold, loving letters, "In honor of Duke, the dog who believed."